All right, everybody. Marin is running like 102 fever, and I can't send her to school. So I've got to stay home with her, and I was feeling so guilty about not being there to read Heart of Darkness with you, and I don't have my book at home. So I thought, well, what else can I do to try to help with some of this? And I came up with this idea of doing um, a literature like reading and then us talking. So maybe you could put in your earphones and listen to this, and then we can follow along and talk about it as we go. Um, if this doesn't work, then I'm sorry. I just wanted to at least try it. And I hope that this uh, is an okay substitute for me being gone. Today in class, in these black hardback books, you're going to read from the start of part two to the end of 37, page 37, and then you're going to read through 42 for homework. Same deal applies. If you show up ready to discuss and talk about it and you've got questions, then I won't give a quiz. But if nobody's read it or I'm only talking to two or three people, then I'll give one. So let's get into this. I'm going to start part two and I'm going to play it. And then every once in a while, I'll pause it and you and I can talk about what's going on. And you can follow along in your book. This is a crazy idea. I hope it works. Come on, literature book.
Section 2. One evening, as I was lying flat on the deck of my steamboat, I heard voices approaching, and there were the nephew and the uncle strolling along the bank. I laid my head on my arm again, and had nearly lost myself in a doze, when somebody said in my ear, as it were, "I am as harmless as a little child, but I don't like to be dictated to. Am I the manager, or am I not? I was ordered to send him there. It's incredible." I became aware that the two were standing on the shore alongside the forepart of the steamboat, just below my head. I did not move. It did not occur to me to move. I was sleepy. "It is unpleasant," grunted the uncle. "He has asked the administration to be sent there," said the other, "with the idea of showing what he could do, and I was instructed accordingly. Look at the influence that man must have. Is it not frightful?" They both agreed it was frightful, then made several bizarre remarks. "Make rain and fine weather." One man, "The council, by the nose." Bits of absurd sentences that got the better of my drowsiness,
So, what's going on here? We know that Marlowe's laying on the boat, and he can hear the nephew and the uncle talking. Who is that? Well, the nephew, of course, is the station manager, and the uncle is the leader of the El Dorado exploration group, the treasure hunters. And they're having this conversation without knowing that Marlowe is there on the boat. And Marlowe is asleep, so he's picking up on these snippets of information. So as you're listening to the rest of this conversation, try to figure out who is the he that they're talking about and what in general are they saying about him.
I had pretty near the whole of my wits about me when the uncle said, "The climate may do away with this difficulty for you. Is he alone there?" "Yes," answered the manager. "He sent his assistant down the river with a note to me in these terms: 'Clear this poor devil out of the country, and don't bother sending more of that sort. I had rather be alone than have the kind of men you can dispose of with me.'"
So the manager got a letter sending one of the other station guys back. And you can tell now that this is Kurtz. He's talking about, I don't like to be dictated to. He wants to be manager. And so we can kind of pick up on that this is Kurtz. And Kurtz did something strange. He sent the station guys back with a note that said, don't send me any more of this type of men. I don't want them here, basically. So he is the only company man, the only white man there where he is, which again adds to this mystery of who Kurtz is and how he's accomplishing being the leader in Ivory.
It was more than a year ago. Can you imagine such impudence? Anything since then? Asked the other hoarsely. Ivory, jerked the nephew. Lots of it. Prime sort. Lots. Most annoying from him. And with that? Questioned the heavy rumble. Invoice, was the reply, fired out, so to speak. Then silence. They had been talking about Kurtz. I was broad awake by this time, but lying perfectly at ease, remained still, having no inducement to change my position. How did that ivory come all this way? Growled the elder man, who seemed very vexed. The other explained that it had come with a fleet of canoes in charge of an English half-caste clerk Kurtz had with him.
Okay, so he doesn't have any station men there with him, but Kurtz does have what he's calling an English half-caste man. This half-caste is kind of a reference to being underneath Kurtz, more like an employee of Kurtz. So they're calling him the half-caste, and he's an Englishman. We're going to learn more about him as we go along. He has an interesting story too, but he is there with him, and he's the one who brings the ivory down, is what we're learning.
That Kurtz had apparently intended to return himself, the station being by that time bare of goods and stores, but after coming 300 miles, had suddenly decided to go back, which he started to do alone in a small dugout with 4 paddlers, leaving the half-caste to continue down the river with the ivory. The 2 fellows there seemed astounded at anybody attempting such a thing. They were...
So what weird thing did Kurtz do besides sending his station men back? Well, he was supposed to come in to bring the ivory into the station and to get some supplies, and then he doesn't. He sends the half-caste on, and he turns around in the canoe after coming 300 miles and goes back. And so no one has seen Kurtz in over a year. And they don't have any station guys there that are reporting to them or writing to them. And the one time they were going to see Kurtz, he turned back around.
Lost for an adequate motive. As to me, I seemed to see Kurtz for the first time. It was a distinct glimpse. The dugout, 4 paddling savages, and the lone white man turning his back suddenly on the headquarters, on relief, on thoughts of home perhaps, setting his face towards the depths of the wilderness, towards his empty, desolate station. I did not know the motive. Perhaps he was just simply a fine fellow who stuck to his work for its own sake. His name, you understand, had not been pronounced once. He was that man, the half-caste, who, as far as I could see, had conducted a difficult trip with great prudence and pluck, was invariably alluded to as that scoundrel.
So he's saying they call Kurtz that man, and they call the half-caste that scoundrel. And as he's laying there and half asleep, Marlowe's having this vision of who Kurtz is. And if you look back at that quote about a man turning his back, on civilization and looking out to the wilderness, that's his vision of who Kurtz is. And the reason why Kurtz, I think, is so intriguing to Marlowe is that he's different. He's different from everybody else. And somehow he's successful at what he does. He's a good worker. And so all of this has him wondering what's going on.
Had reported that the man had been very ill, had recovered imperfectly. The 2 below me moved away then a few paces and strolled back and forth at some distance. I heard military post. Doctor. 200 miles. Quite alone now. Unavoidable delays. 9 months. No news. Strange rumors. They approached again.
So when you look at those snippets that you're hearing from the manager and from his uncle, it's starting to paint a picture. I mean, it's an incomplete picture, but he was sick. He healed imperfectly. It's been 9 months. No news. They've had unavoidable delays getting up there. Remember what Marlowe said about the steamboat and how he thought it was kind of stupid to be altogether natural that someone would have just taken it and run it on the rocks. All kind of alluding that the station manager didn't really want to get up there that fast.
Just as the manager was saying, no one, as far as I know, unless a species of wandering trader, a pestilential fellow, snapping ivory from the natives. Who was it they were talking about now? I gathered in snatches that this was some man supposed to be in Kurtz's district, and of whom the manager did not approve. We will not be free from unfair competition till one of these fellows is hanged for an example, he said. Certainly, grunted the other. Get him hanged. Why not? Anything can be done in this country. That's what I say. Nobody here, you understand, here can endanger your position. And why? You stand the climate. You outlast them all. The danger is in Europe. But there, before I left, I took care to... They moved off and whispered. Then their voices rose again. The extraordinary series of delays is not my fault. I did my best, the fat man sighed. Very sad. And the pestiferous absurdity of his talk, continued the other. He bothered me enough when he was here. Each station should be like a beacon, on the road towards better things, a center for trade, of course, but also for humanizing, improving, instructing,
So if you'll notice in your book, this becomes a double quote. If you look at the quotation marks, what's interesting about that is that the whole thing, is a double quote because Marlowe is talking. But then we have single quotes around what the uncle and the manager are saying. And then this is a quote within that quote. So this is Marlowe speaking, telling us what the uncle is saying, and what he's saying from someone else. That's why it's a double quote, kind of confusing there. But notice that this is like the business's, this is like the party line, that every station should be this beacon of hope and light. And notice that he uses the word beacon, which automatically assumes that there's light, which is such a contrast to what we keep hearing about the darkness.
You, that ass, and he wants to be manager? No, it's... Here he got choked by excessive indignation, and I lifted my head the least bit. I was surprised to see how near they were, right under me. I could have spat on their hats. They were looking on the ground, absorbed in thought. The manager was switching his leg with a slender twig. His sagacious relative lifted his head. You have been well since you came out this time, he asked. The other gave a start. Who? I? Ah, like a charm, like a charm. But the rest, oh my goodness, all sick. They die so quick, too, that I haven't had time to send them out of the country. It's incredible.
So, of course, you knew this from the previous section. The manager keeps his job because he's never sick. And so the uncle's asking about his health, and he's like, oh, I've been great, but people out here die so fast that I can't even get them home, before they're dead.
Just so, grunted the uncle. Ah, my boy, trust to this. I say, trust to this. I saw him extend his short flipper of an arm for a gesture that took in the forest, the creek, the mud, the river, seemed to beckon with a dishonoring flourish before the sunlit face of the land, a treacherous appeal to the lurking death, to the hidden evil, to the profound darkness of its heart.
So when you're really listening to that quote, that's the first time it refers to the heart of darkness. What is the it's referring to there? Yeah, it's the nature, it's the forest itself. And what did the uncle mean by, look to this or trust this, and him flourishing his arm pointing to nature? Well, he's encouraging his nephew there to just let nature take care of Kurtz. That, that might end up doing the dirty work for him. He may not have to get rid of Kurtz at all. Then the nature may do it for him. I can only record in 15-minute increments, so I'm about to pause this one and then we'll pick up with another one.